Ladies and gentlemen, I am the American SpyFox. Welcome to the channel, part 2 of the Nirvana Unplugged Retrospective review. Gonna be honest with you, part 1 didn't do that well. Thank you to all of you who did watch it. Thank you for your positive feedback, but I didn't see much point in editing part 2. I've uploaded it more like a podcast that you can listen to. I wanted to move on to Nirvana series number 20. We're going to go back to the Cobain case, and I've dug up some new details to share there. Again, I really hope that this little series would have done well, but it didn't, and that's fine. We'll just move on. Here's part 2 if you want to listen to it. Enjoy. With that kind of dedication to his craft, it's no wonder he didn't screw the song up.
Okay, but here's another one I could screw up.
What is it?
Am I gonna do this by myself?
What is it?
During the impromptu band rehearsal on the 17th and earlier on the day of recording, Pennyroyal Tea had been a band arrangement. At the last second, cameras rolling, Kurt made the decision to do this one by himself. Dave Grohl encourages Kurt, "Yeah, man. Do it by yourself." I get the feeling Cobain was just being courteous. I get the feeling he'd already made up his mind he was going to do this one alone. For some reason, the band just couldn't seem to get it right. So showing his leadership abilities, Kurt made the executive decision to ensure this song was performed right the first time. There would be no second take. A part of me thinks that Kurt also wanted to show MTV who was in charge of his band, making changes to the set as the cameras rolled, and it was the right choice. The performance needed that one moment with Cobain out there alone. It gave us a little taste of what a Cobain solo project might have sounded like, what one man and his guitar can do with enough hours of practice behind him. As the song ends and the audience applauds, Cobain reaches over to light a cigarette. He takes a long drag, looking very satisfied with the solo performance he just gave. For a split second, there seems to be a moment of silence, as if the audience is reflecting on the song. But Dave Grohl chimes in, somewhat ruining the moment. That sounded good. Without missing a beat, Kurt responds, "Shut up." I look for a smirk on Cobain's face or any little sign of body language that he was only kidding with his drummer, but none comes. I get the sense that Kurt was telling Dave to not mistake his kindness for weakness. Again, at the start of Pennyroyal Tea, Kurt asked the band if he should do the song by himself, but it seemed to be Kurt had already made up his mind that he was going to do this one alone. Asking the band was more a courtesy than anything, a kindness. He was going to do what he felt he should do to make the performance the best it could be. But when Dave tried to reassure him at the end that he did well, the shut up felt more like, "I know it was good. That's why I made the decision to do it alone, and I don't need your permission or your reassurance." Or maybe I'm just looking too deep into this, and Kurt meant nothing by it other than to be modest. Next up on the set list was, in this humble narrator's opinion, a criminally underrated song, "Dumb." The lyrics alone are so well crafted and orchestrated, a story of a person who is both giving up and starting over at the same time, an acceptance of one's own limitations, yet finding an inner peace with finally understanding what they are capable of and what they are not. To me, this song's true meaning is finding your inner serenity, finally accepting your true self for exactly what you are and being okay with what you've discovered. I'm not like them, but I can pretend. The sun is gone, but I have a light. The day is done, but I'm having fun. I think I'm dumb, maybe just happy. The chorus of Dumb is simple yet satisfying and reminds the listener to take it easy on themselves, to not judge yourself too harshly. As Kurt repeats over and over, "I think I'm just happy," it becomes very apparent why Lori Goldstein and her world-class cello playing were added to this soul-affirming tune. Her sound seems to dance and wrap around Kurt's vocals, then envelop the entire melody within his pauses. Listen to the chorus and I believe you'll see what I mean.
I think I'm dumb, maybe just happy. Think I'm just happy. Think I'm just happy.
For such a simple, bare-bones song such as Paulie, which, by the way, is nearly identical to Dumb, Goldstein manages to bring a whole new level of perspective, transforming it into a complex arrangement that belies its true simplicity. She effortlessly weaves and bobs in and out of Kurt and Dave's harmonizing duets, loaning the song a beauty that is in contrast to the lyrics' harsh meanings.
Got some rope, haven't told, promise you, haven't true. Let me take a ride, hurt yourself, want some help, help myself.
Kurt Cobain was a bold musician, one who walked it like he talked it. He wanted to bring attention to the everyday concerns that women face, and felt as though the best way to get people to listen was to popularize a song about one of the most horrific acts of sexual abuse in Washington state history. Imagine for a moment being in a position where you actually have to ask someone to stop burning you with a blowtorch. You ask them to untie you, and them agreeing only because they like the thought of you thinking you'll escape, only so they can catch you again. Paulie was very obviously a song meant to show people how depraved some men can become and how dangerous the world can be for a female to only walk down the street alone. Even as a 12-year-old, I understood the implications of the lyrics and empathized with the female character, even though at the time I thought her to be fictitious. When I later found the story to be real, it hit me even harder. If Cobain wanted to shock people into the realities that still happen to women every day, he definitely hit the mark. Paulie instilled in me a deep-seated anger for sexual predators, one so deep that I wouldn't bat an eye or miss out on any sleep if my job were to flip the switch in their execution chambers. You can't fix that kind of depravity. No amount of incarceration or therapy will ever change a predator's compulsions. It's no wonder that the same type of mentally ill, perverse creeps would assault yet another girl while singing the lyrics of Paulie to her. Cobain's true meaning went right over their heads. It was not meant to glorify, but to make aware. Only a subhuman would interpret his intentions any other way. As we know, Cobain would be even more bold on In Utero, blatantly penning the words, "Rape me." This too would again be interpreted the wrong way by those who could not understand the cynicism in his tone. Speaking of tone, Nirvana would change up the tone of the evening, if only briefly, with an upbeat version of On a Plane.
Start this off without any words. Got so high, scratching up there. Love myself better than you. I know it's wrong, so what should I do? The finest day I've ever had was when I learned to crawl from out. Love myself better than you.
But just when the audience seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, Kurt would switch back to a somber tone, a chilling rendition of Something in the Way, again with Laurie Goldstein's cello accentuating his deeply sullen lyrics. With his eyes closed, Cobain barely opens his mouth as he hums along to the morose melody.
Underneath the bridge, top is sprung a leaf, and the animals I've trapped have all become my pets, and I'm living off of grass and the drippings from the ceiling. It's okay, fish, 'cause 'cause they don't have any feeling. Something in the way, something in the way, yeah. Something in the way. Something in the way, yeah. Something in the way. Something in the way,
While the band takes a quick breather after this emotional performance, one of the audience members yells,
Hurry up.
"This is the exact wrong thing to do if you want Kurt Cobain to perform for you." Raised on a punk rock ethos, rebellion is in his nature. Hell, his most popular song speaks of one of his deepest resentments that comes with being an artist. Here we are now. Entertain us. Kurt once had a meltdown in Rome during the first Sub Pop tour, telling Bruce Pavitt he quit because he felt like a clown. The audience was demanding him to play the songs they wanted to hear, and it made him feel like a tool. No surprise that when told to hurry up, Cobain instead sits back in his chair and starts to talk, even postponing the introduction of the Meat Puppets, or should I say Brothers Meat, just to prove that he was not going to, quote-unquote, cry on command. Although my 40-year-old self hates to admit it, my 12-year-old self had absolutely no clue who the Meat Puppets were. But when Kurt Cobain introduced them, I knew there had to be something special about them, and they did not disappoint. The songs they brought to the table were unlike anything I'd ever heard and quickly became my favorite part of the evening. I mean, come on, who hasn't been in their shower and tried to hit those high notes Kurt manages to reach on plateau?
foothills shake from many hands. There's nothing on the top but a bucket and a mop and an illustrated book about birds. You see a lot up there, but don't be scared. Who needs Jackson when you got words?
Yeah, it still can't do it. Or who hasn't looked at their partner and sang them the question,
Where the bad folks go when they die? They don't go to heaven where the angels fly. Go to a lake of fire and fry. See him again till the 4th of July.
Kurt knew what he was doing all along. MTV, who was highly upset by his choice of guest, could not see his vision. Fortunately, Kurt had enough power by this time in his career that he was able to overrule MTV producer Alex Coletti, who I'm sure would now pretend that he didn't try to stop Nirvana from bringing them on the program, which he did. In the end, the Meat Puppets added just the right amount of variety to an already astounding performance. That cold fall evening, November 18th, 1993, brought a number of incredibly lucky people together for a night they will forever cherish in their collective minds, but it would not be the wind or the rain that sent them away shivering. The very first music journalist to ever write an article about Nirvana described Kurt Cobain as the singer with the freeze-dried vocals. He'd use this superpower to finish the night, leaving the audience quite literally stunned within their seats. Kurt would assail new heights within his own vocal range, perhaps even surprising himself if one judges by that last look on his face. With this, Kurt had hypnotized an entire audience that later claimed the whole event more akin to a spiritual experience than a rock concert. By the end, they'd sit there in silence, unable to move or to even speak. After the show, Kurt walked the aisles, signing autographs and shaking hands. Many would later say they found it difficult to speak in his presence after the life-changing event he'd just put them through. Their silence led him to believe he'd performed poorly, later asking MTV's Amy Finnerty why no one was talking or why they did not cheer as loud as he was accustomed to after a Nirvana concert. He took this silence as a cue that they did not like the acoustic set. Realizing that Kurt did not understand the heights of rock godness he'd just ascended to, she replied to him, "Kurt, they think you're Jesus Christ." Kurt had just given them a true spiritual experience, one they could not get anywhere else, one that even much later, those who were lucky enough to witness find it hard to describe to another who was not present. Coming to the end, there's one last detail I would like to emphasize. To this day, people often refer to that last look on Cobain's face as a man who's had enough. They see a man on the edge, on the fringes of mental health, who just can't hold on any longer. Often people will say, well, no wonder he did what he did. Look at that last look. Look at his facial expression. He'd had enough. They also point to the setting, the stargazer lilies, the dim light, the funeral-like setting. Well, later Alex Coletti would admit that the whole funeral-like setting was actually his idea.
Day of the show, we're always trying to get the right stools. It seems like Unplugged should have its own stool by now, you know. Brought a few different things out for Kurt to try, and of course he picked an office chair.
Full of flower boxes. Tom, it's full of flower boxes here.
And he was the one that suggested the stargazer lilies, those the big white lilies. I think it was me, it wasn't Kurt, although it makes the story better. I was like trying to get a handle, I was like a funeral. And he said, yeah, like a funeral, that'd be cool. So it wasn't Kurt certainly foreshadowing, but it was kind of, when you watched it back, it certainly felt that way.
His first words, day of the show. So Kurt Cobain has not prearranged anything. He hasn't even arranged for a chair to sit in. Day of the show, I come up to him, we show him a few different things. We say, you know, he did suggest the stargazer lilies, but I went up to him and said, hey, should it look like a funeral? And Kurt said, yeah, what is he going to say? It's the day of the show. He can't say, oh, no, let's postpone this until we can do something different. Alex Coletti has already arranged for the show to look very somber. Kurt, not wanting to be difficult, just agrees with him. Kurt agreed, but possibly Kurt didn't care. Possibly Kurt was just trying to be agreeable. It was Alex Coletti who put all this somber aesthetic into the evening, not Kurt Cobain. And if you go back and listen to that last line on Where Did You Sleep Last Night, the vocal range that Kurt Cobain expresses, it's nearly impossible. That's why it's so jaw-dropping. You'd never heard that before. Imagine how much energy had to go in to this very emotional-filled show. He had been rehearsing and then recording all day, and then there has to be this climactic moment. He's gasping for air and giving it every last thing he has. He was giving us everything he had for the performance, and that last sigh, that last gasp of air was all he had for the evening. I don't believe it was all he had for his life. Remember that Unplugged was recorded in 1993, months before Cobain's tragic ending. Because Unplugged didn't come out until after Cobain's tragic ending, people often refer to it as his last performance, his last look. Even MTV producer Alex Coletti says that it makes the story better. What makes the story better? He's saying that it makes the story better if Kurt was sending out a message to everybody? When you think about it, that's kind of sick. Alex Coletti is a man who cares more about ratings than about people.